Thanks for joining us today. We've got Jaron Phillips here, who's our webmaster, who's behind the controls, because I'm a bit of a Luddite. And so here we've also got with us today is Josh Darby. Many of you will know Josh. He's a career firefighter and member of the union, of course. And I'll let Josh introduce Professor Grant Schofield.
Thanks, Wattie. Yeah, really good to be here today. And yeah, we've got Professor Grant Schofield with us today from Auckland University of Technology. Grant's a former psychologist. Actually, Grant, do you want to just give a little bit of your background in terms of, how you've come involved with this project?
Thanks, Josh. Hi, Wattie, and hi to all the PFU members out there, and thanks for having me on today. So I'm a professor of public health, which is a sort of odd title, and it's not to be confused with COVID. That was a public health issue, but my area is really about sort of health span and well-being and what behaviours and activities and other things we can do to have a good life while we're on the planet. So, and that's obviously pretty pertinent because there's a pretty high prevalence of people doing not so well with their mental health, through to pretty serious issues and stuff. And the question is, what can we do about that, especially in workplaces? So it's something I've been interested in my whole career. We've done several of these big surveys, nationwide ones. For a while, we had a national wellbeing index that measured both poor mental health as well as the factors that help people do well. And I'm also interested in some of the behaviours around that, which we're not covering in the work we're doing with you, but things like eating and exercise and sleep and that sort of thing. So yeah, my research centre at AUT is called the Human Potential Centre. We've been pretty successful. We've been going for 20 years. We've won a few times the university's award for the most successful research centre. Really proud of what we've been able to achieve. So I've got quite a large team and quite a large team on this project, which is a sort of collaboration between Movember, FENS, and ourselves.
Fantastic. So the survey was launched yesterday, and all of our members, in fact, all of staff and FENS, not just firefighters, are encouraged to participate. Can you give us a little bit of a background? One of the perhaps barriers to people participating is concerns about how the data is collected, who accesses the data, and then who analyses the data at the end. So can you just give us a quick overview of those confidentiality and security measures that you have in place?
Yeah, that's good stuff. So the first thing is that obviously we don't want one firefighter going, oh, this is a good idea, I'm going to answer this 400 times. And so everyone needs to have their own unique access, but we do that through a two-step verification process. So you've got a link. Everyone out there came out this week, and it's going to be available to the end of March to do the survey. But when you click on that, you'll be asked to put in your FENS email, and it'll send you a 10-digit number to put in. You can just copy and paste it. You don't have to retype it, and you're away from there. But that identifies you and links you with your email. So we will never know who you are, but we know that you're unique, and that's really important. So it's anonymous in that sense, that we don't ever associate the data with your name, and it's confidential in the sense that we keep your data here at AUT. So me and my team are pretty experienced in this. We have the data, we keep it in, and we're required by law to keep it in some pretty safe places. There's some pretty strict standards around data security and that, so people can be assured of that. Not only that, we have to, by law, also go through an ethics approval process, which is pretty robust, and we've done that. So there's a whole bunch of sort of quality standards to make sure we've got it. We never actually give the data to FENS. We'll summarise it. No one will ever know who you are or what your station is. Those are all data that will never be presented outside of us. So I think if I was doing this, I'd want to know that those safeguards were in place, especially on sensitive issues. around things like your own health and mental health, and what your views on the organisation that pays your salary. Those are really important things, and I think we're hopefully people will be rest assured that we've got those well and truly covered.
And then at the end, the data will be analysed, and I assume you're going to analyse it in a series of cohorts, because we've got various different work groups and roles that will be participating.
Yeah, so this survey thankfully is expanded, which is great news. So originally we were just looking at professional firefighters in the Te Heku region to go along with the pilot Whanaungatanga Programme that's going on along in there. And then it became more obvious that we needed a more robust way of understanding if A, the Whanaungatanga Programme was effective, and B, what was going on in the rest of the country. So then stage 2 was a plan to expand this survey to all professional firefighters, which was agreed on, and then actually all people working for FENS. We haven't done the volunteers at this stage, but hopefully we can do that at some other point in time. And the reason that's really useful is we can compare people in the rest of the country with the people who are getting some organisational changes, which are the first ones to kick off to see how effective they are in Te Heku region. That's called a nested case control design, and that lifts the science of this to a whole nother level, so we can be really confident about what's getting done actually has some rigour, which, people go, well, that you're spending money on that, not the program, but we're actually spending money on both. So there's money going into change, and there's money going into knowing if that actually worked, which I think is really important.
So, Josh, do you want to jump in here? So you've been working with Professor Grant Schofield and his team in developing the survey as well as the program. Do you want to talk about the people that have been involved from your end as project leader, and how this has come about, so that our membership understand that this is very much a grassroots kind of driven initiative as well?
Yeah, sure, Wattie. So probably a little bit of background information as to why it came about. Movember is quite a well-known charity organisation. They funded an international scoping review, which basically means they just funded a researcher to look at all of the mental ill health or investigate mental ill health and suicide prevention programs for veterans and first responders internationally. And I think the initial idea was that they'd identify ones that were evidence-based, so that there's been research done on and that have been shown to be effective, and then they'd fund scaling those programs so they have benefit outside of where they currently are, to other regions, et cetera, et cetera. Unfortunately, that report came back. It had two really significant findings. One is there's a lack of evidence-based mental ill health and suicide prevention programs. So that doesn't mean there's not lots of programs out there. It's just that they're not being evaluated. And so while they can be well-intentioned, until they're actually scientifically evaluated, we don't know if they are creating the change that they set out to change. And so that's why Movember is really big on making sure programs are evaluated robustly, which is why we've got AUT involved. It's why University of Canberra is also involved. It's why we've got some of the world's best kind of first responder researchers over top of this, which has been really good. The other main finding from that report was the types of initiatives most commonly implemented by organisations to deal with mental ill health and suicide for first responders kind of look at the individuals or the individual factors. So that's like self-care stuff. It's kind of talked about sometimes as yoga mats and green smoothies, and nothing against those things. I've tried both of them. But what recent research has shown is a significant proportion predicts the risk of psychological injury for first responders is actually organizational stresses. And so if your program's only ever dealing with the individual side, and there are individual responsibilities that need to be taken, you're actually potentially missing 50% or more of what's causing the issue. So that's what we took on board, was that, hey, we need something that's evidence-based, and we need something that looks at the organizational factors that are contributing to this. And that's basically because we know the other factor is going to shitty calls, to tough calls, like the purple calls. But that's always going to be part of the job. There's not a do around that factor, but there is something we believe we can do around these organizational stresses and factors. So That's what brought about that focus. And then, yeah, we applied. I think there were 150 applications from around the world. We were selected as one of 15 from 8 different countries, which is really excited. The only one for New Zealand, and the only one of those programs that has a pure focus on the organizational factors. I was reaching out through my studies to Grant. I was connected to him after the YW360 report. We were looking at doing some further research. We got the grant. Fens came on board and took over that grant. And then I reached out to Professor Robert Eisenberger and his team over at the University of Houston. He's since passed away, but his team helped us. He and his team helped us to develop the survey. He is the creator of a research phenomenon, perceived organizational support, and that's defined as the degree to which you as a firefighter, in our context, believe that your leaders, your managers, and your organization cares about your well-being and your contributions to the organization. So we've been really lucky to work with the likes of Professor Eisenberger. We've connected to Professor Nick Carlton overseas, Grant, one of the leaders in the research space over in Canada, and have an awesome team. And they've been helping our project team, and the main people on that is myself, Blair Kiley, who's a group manager in the Waikato, Jamie Whitehead, who's a station officer in Auckland and Te Huku, and also more recently we've had Andy Chappelle, who's a former career firefighter, and he's now the National Wellbeing Officer. So those guys have helped us to figure out what are the things we should look at the survey, and then we've had these universities help put together a really robust survey. So really happy with what we've got to.
Fantastic. So,
can I just add there, Wattie? I mean, for the firefighters that don't know Josh, and for the ones that do, I think will agree with this, that you've actually just got a complete force of nature here, where a firefighter from being on the trucks has noticed issues, felt concerned about them enough to go and do extra study to understand them, doing some postgraduate work, and then in an unprecedented way has gone and then sought and got money internationally, and this is hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars from outside the organization to run this work. I mean, I've never heard of, in my 25 years in academia and this sort of practice, I'd never heard of this sort of grassroots type activity happening. So, it's just hats off, and you can see he's listing off names of people who are pretty much the world leaders, and Josh has no fear of going and knocking on their virtual door and saying, can you be involved in this project? And to a team, no one said no. In fact, they've all just jumped on. So that's what we're dealing with.
Absolutely. So for our membership, you've just been told about the calibre of those that are involved in this project, as well as how relevant it is to our particular membership through Josh and the others that he's mentioned as part of the team. So what will it take in terms of responses? What we want to do is really encourage all our members to participate in the survey and to give it the credence that it needs. So, of course, Grant, the higher the return, the better the response, the stronger the evidential base. What sort of numbers are you needing in order to actually for us to have some really sound evidential base for moving forward in terms of what is happening and what needs addressing and how that should be addressed?
Yep, so that's a good question, and this will be on everyone's mind, because we've also had the New Zealand census just recently, and it's like, how many people actually have to answer this for you to have a clue what's going on? And this is a census of fire and emergency, and so everyone in fire and emergency who is paid by fire and emergency is being asked, and the question is, how many would need to do that for us to have a clue what's going on? Now, typically fire and emergency gets quite a low response around their surveys, so 15-20%. That's just not going to be good enough for us to tell what's going on. I want to see us get closer to what the PFU achieved in terms of its voting, which is 70 to 80. I don't know your exact figure. 70 to 80% of people did it. But if we could, the more that do this, the better this is, because we have, in technical terms, some fidelity about what's going on. In other words, we're sure that the numbers we're getting represent what you, the firefighters out there, think about the organization, what you think about life, how things are going for you, the sort of events that happen in your workplace, We really want to know. It's so important that what we get back there reflects what is actually going on in reality. So as we head north of 70%, then I have some confidence.
So that's why we need each and every one of our members to participate. Now, for the firefighters, for those of our members that aren't first responders and aren't really on the face of being exposed to trauma, such as the firefighters and the comm centre operators, this is still a really valuable survey across the board, and because of that organisational impact aspect, isn't it?
Mm. And also remember, there's quite a few people who aren't on active duty, are still part of the other layers of non-uniform layer offence who have been firefighters, and so that's interesting in of itself to see how they're going. And for those that haven't done those roles, yeah, we're still massively interested in your health and well-being and how the organisational factors within FENS impact on that. So, you know, wherever you are, it's super important, and this is of benefit not just to you, but for everyone who works around you.
And this is independent of FENS, so our members will be sitting there thinking, well, we fill out the FENS people survey every year, and it comes back with appalling results, which they do airbrush a little bit when they do the analysis, and then nothing happens, nothing changes. So the big difference for this one is that this will form the evidence in which we as a union can push hard for those changes, even if the organisation isn't keen to pick those up. So can you just talk to us a little bit how that would work between the nexus between the outcome and the survey and then the next steps in the program?
Josh, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so I think it's a really good point. If we just did one survey, all that really does is give us a snapshot of the factors that we're looking at in the survey. And it's probably worth just covering generally what the survey covers, Wattie. So in the first part of the survey, you get asked what they call like demographic information. So that's like age and ethnicity and that type of thing. And then there's some organizational demographics like your rank and where you're based. And then in the next part of the survey, it will ask you around the organizational factors that we hope we can shift the dial on. So it asks about perceived organizational support. It asks about that at the co-worker level. So that's for firefighters, that's your fellow firefighters and your officer. It then asks about the managerial level, so how well you feel supported and how much you think well-being is prioritized from your managers. So again, for firefighters, that's your GM and DM. And then finally, it asks in relation to the organization. And what we know from Professor Eisenberger is generally when people tend to conceptualize the organization, they're thinking at the level above co-workers and their kind of frontline managers. It's kind of that upper level of managers. So you'll get the opportunity to answer those questions at those three different levels. You'll then be asked about things like organizational integrity and managerial integrity. So that's to what degree you feel like your leaders and the organizations, that their words meet their actions. That's the concept of organizational integrity. There's organizational accountability. So that's asking you about to what degree do you feel when there's mistakes made in the organization that they are owned and followed up on. We ask about organizational competence. Those are the type of organizational questions you'll get. And then the last section, it's called psychological strain, but that actually accounts for your exposure to potentially traumatic events. And if you're wondering what that encompasses, we've gone on to explain that. And so you'll be asked about that in relation to the last month and in relation to the last year. And then there are measures. Now, most of the measures in the survey are validated, which means they've been used in other surveys and studies around the world. And that's included for PTSD, depression, and anxiety, but also some good stuff like resilience and post-traumatic growth. So that's kind of what the survey will capture. The survey actually goes out 2 times, and this is to your point, Wattie. Yeah. So while it's going to help us to understand the impacts of exposure to potentially traumatic events, and not just a single exposure, but the cumulative toll of being exposed to potentially traumatic events, it's going to work as an evaluation tool. We're going to do organizational change initiatives. They're going to be implemented after the first survey period. And then we run the survey again, either later this year or early next year. And that'll tell us, have the things that firefighters have come up with to deal with these, they're called psychosocial hazards or organizational stresses, have the things that our firefighters and managers come up with actually made a difference? And maybe Grant, you can talk about that nested case control design and how that allows us to do that.
Yeah, so I think what he was also asking, which I think is important to answer here, is what happened. So we get a bunch of results showing where we think some improvements could be made, and we work with FENS, and I'll be undertaking a separate piece of work where I'm interviewing every single manager and senior manager in Te Hiku and in an adjacent region to try and understand what they think about the sort of practices around helping firefighters' well-being. And that's going to then, Josh is also doing a whole bunch of workshops to try and understand what we can do. And so over the next year, we've undertaken quite a rigorous change process in the way that hopefully managers and senior managers run and interact with firefighters. And exactly what those look like is still part of that process. So I think that's part of what Wattie was asking. And then once those have been undertaken, it's like, did that actually make any demonstrable difference to the life of a firefighter, their well-being, how they feel about the organisation, but much more importantly, how that helps them deal with the day-to-day realities of being on the trucks, which is going to purple calls, whether that be a paediatric cardiac arrest or a youth suicide or a fatal car crash or other events which involve some distress and trauma, and have we been able to improve that for you on the trucks? So that's the idea of both the program and the analysis. I mean, it's great having change, but change that doesn't work, you'd want to know about that, and change that does work, you'd also really want to know about that, because then you can double down and invest in the stuff that has worked. And I guess that's the idea, is that once we've got that within the Te Hiku region, then we can hopefully move forward more to the national level and make a difference to everyone everywhere.
And I think that's worth noting, Wattie, that the pilot design allows us to evaluate it before we scale it. Before we can go to the organisation and say, this has worked or this hasn't worked. And if it's worked, or if parts of it worked, here's the evidence as to why this should be scaled for the benefit of the rest of firefighters here in New Zealand. And potentially, Wattie, because we're the only program solely looking at organisational stresses, there's the potential that if it was effective, it could be used for the benefit of firefighters and first responders and maybe even veterans internationally. So that's a really exciting thing for me and Grant, and I'm sure you, is that, our firefighters being involved in this might not only help them, but it might help their colleagues all around the world. Like that's the potential here. So we're pretty excited about that.
I can, even though it's just us sitting here and this will go out later, I can already feel some reaction from the firefighters and saying, well, that's all very well, but FENS won't do what they should do about this. So we need this evidence, and we need this program so that we can fight hard for it as well, and what needs to happen and how it should be rolled out. And it may need to be different. It may need to be altered. It may need to be amended as the evidence shows down the track. So we're as a union, we're saying to our membership, we understand your reticence and we understand your disbelief that this is going to actually bring any form of benefit, and just take the ride, just get on the survey, do the survey, then we can fight down the track with whatever the evidence throws up that we need to deal with and how that can be best used. So so they would have got an email yesterday, Josh, and there'll be some reminders, I think. Can you remember? I can't remember what the email address they would have got that from yesterday.
Yes, I think it's Whanaungatanga and then program, but pgm@fireandemergency.nz. So they should have got an email from there. If you haven't got that, let me know. Drop me an email at joshdarby@fireandemergency.nz. But all employees within FENS should have got that email. I think there was an issue with the participant information sheet, the dates on that. So the survey is live from yesterday, the 9th of March, for 3 weeks through to the 30th of March. So you'll have an opportunity to fill it out during those 3 weeks.
And even though that email address has fireandemergency.nz in it, the data is not going to Fire and Emergency.
Yeah, and the link is not to anything to do with Fire and Emergency. It's to our Qualtrics site, which is pretty much the world's best survey software, and we host that on our own servers. And so yes, that link is nothing to do with FENS.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And at the conclusion of the survey, how long do you think you'll need before you can release something regarding the analysis of your findings?
Yeah, well, we're definitely under the pump with that one.
Yeah,
So
under the spot, unfortunately. Yeah.
yeah. So there is a pretty tight time frame for us. So we've got a sort of headline report within just a matter of weeks, and then a detailed report within I don't know, about 2 months. So yeah, things will be coming pretty thick and fast. And yeah, and thanks. I should also say thanks to the people out there who have already responded, and we've had a really big response rate from uniformed staff. So that's already within the first 2 hours, it was in the hundreds answered. So thank you.
Yeah, just further to that, Wattie. So one of the other things that you'll get asked when you get that, and so you'll get a participant, you'll get an email. It's got a participant information sheet. That's an ethics requirement, just to make sure that you're aware of what the benefits and risks of doing the survey, what's involved in the survey. It'll have all the information around data and confidentiality. You'll also be asked to consent, and this is really important to note, because you cannot consent to this but still do the survey. But you're asked to do a further consent around your K41, K13, and absenteeism data. It's your choice, obviously, whether you do the survey, but also whether you consent to that. That just adds another level of robustness, because then AUT can look at your exposure to trauma, not only just in terms of what you put in the survey, but what your K41 stats are. And the absenteeism data just helps AUT to analyze, well, what's the flow-on effects from if, say, the organizational stresses are impacting a person in terms of other things. So that's important to note. The data goes through to Dr. Lisa Mackay, who's part of Grant's team, and she'll match the survey responses to the individuals, and I think that's done with an employee number, our employee numbers. So that's important. That's confidential, and then that data is de-identified before they actually go into the survey. That's my understanding. So it's anonymized or de-identified at that stage.
So FENS provides that K41, for example, information, then but it's AUT that then marries that up with the response. So FENS does not have, while they always have your K41 information, they do not have that corresponding response in the survey.
Correct. They have no access to that. So they have no access to any of the raw data. All Foreign Emergency will get is the aggregated. So once it's been de-identified, I think it's maybe at the district or region level, it'll be at that level that they'd get information, and that's the same information, obviously, that the NZPFU will get, or I think they get a one-pager. Anyone who participates they actually get the findings sent to them at a one-pager, but they have to be in such a way, because it's the law, that individuals can't be identified. So that's really important.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for your time this morning. Is there anything in particular, Grant, that we haven't covered that you'd like to mention?
I just want to reiterate what Josh was saying. So the interesting thing for this whole thing is that Movember, the men's health charity, big worldwide thing, specifically went out of its way and said, where could we contribute the most to men's health? This is, I mean, I know there's plenty of women in FENS as well, but there's quite a high proportion of men, especially active firefighters. And they said first responders. They exposed to trauma as part of their work, and there's often factors that get in the way of them getting through those aspects of their work. So that was, first of all, that was really exciting. The second thing is that this became a really competitive international process where hundreds and hundreds of people put in applications. Some of the best universities in the world, some big police and fire departments and around the world, and we were successful in getting that funding. Not only that, when you actually looked at the successful applications, this was amongst the best. It's in terms of what Movember had identified as their priority, which is sorting out the organisational issues and organisational change. There's us and perhaps one other, I think in Ireland, had been close to that, and some other Aussies had done a little bit of work on that. But many of the others were still stuck down in that individual responsibility and change area. So this this so far as first responding, your well-being, health, in general. This is really at the top of the pile worldwide. So, I mean, not only contributing to your own well-being, your organizational well-being, and hopefully making some changes in a large bureaucracy, but this is a real opportunity for New Zealand to be the leaders in this work. And again, I just can't say enough about Josh and Blair, Kylie, and the other guys who have sort of managed to bring this together across FENZ.
So there you have it. This is why you have to participate in the survey, because it will impact on what programs are developed and available for you moving forward, but also could do some really serious assistance in terms of what's happening globally. And we have a really strong international global alliance of firefighter unions, as you know. We rely very heavily on them for a range of factors, including the research that we've had into occupational cancer. This is your time to give back in some ways, and this is really useful work. So it might be a little impost on your time and energy, and I know some of these questions are going to be quite hard to answer in terms of making you think about those situations again. Josh, there's care for people as they walk through that survey, and if they have any issues that brings it back up, or they feel that it's actually traumatic to walk through again.
Yeah, absolutely, Wattie. So, obviously, if you're going to do a program around helping fire and emergency move to being more trauma informed, you need to keep that in mind when you're designing a wellbeing survey. So we've got 2 clinical psychologists that we've worked with that have looked over the survey. So it's Dr. Paul Skero. He's actually a neuroclinical psychologist and the executive advisor to the New Zealand College of Clinical Psychologists. And also Jason Hannett, who's a clinical psychologist who works with our people in Ngātai Ki Te Puku. So both of those gentlemen have looked over the survey, provided us advice and guidance. There's also, at the end of the survey, there's a number of functions. So there's the normal function that you get at the end of most surveys, which is here are the support services. But we wanted to take it a step further. And so there's also a wellbeing prompt that may come up in relation to some of those questions around PTSD or depression, which is just a bit more personable and will help link people up to support if that's required. So, keeping in mind that, our firefighters, those that are currently operational, they could be going into actual suicides or things like that that are difficult. We just wanted to make sure that there's some really good tools there. And we hope that the survey can actually be a tool in that way, Wattie, that if people do need support, this is a bit of a prompt for them to get it. We obviously, because of the confidentiality thing, won't be following up directly, but there will be some prompts in the survey for people to get help, and we'll make sure we identify what those accesses or what those support mechanisms are.
So again, please participate in the survey. Josh is available if you've got any other questions or information that you need. We'll be sending out reminders, and hopefully we'll get that huge response that we want. We do want to keep up the NZPFU tradition of around the 70 to 80% response rate. So and more would be even better. So thanks very much. Thanks, Grant, for your time this morning, and Josh for all the work you're doing on this. And we really are going to look forward now to getting some of those results from the survey and what needs to happen, and ensuring sustainable and physical action is taken to start the necessary care and prevention work that we need. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Yeah, thanks, Wattie. Thanks to the PFU.